Do you want to know how to create your own RWBY team so you can make awesome fan animations with them? No problem. I've recently started working on a web series based on the original RWBY team I created, and alongside this series, I've also decided to release a series of tutorials to help you create something similar yourself. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to create your own RWBY team. From finding the right idea and developing the characters, to some rules you'll need to follow so your creation feels more like a part of the original show. But first of all, the question is, why should you make fan animations at all? And why do I specifically recommend creating RWBY fan animations, especially if you're new to animation or filmmaking in general? The simple reason is that creating fan animations actually has a lot of benefits. One of the biggest advantages is that you can dive into an existing world and start telling stories without spending countless hours building a fictional universe from scratch. After all, world building takes a lot of time and effort, so using an established setting can be a great way to focus more on building up your skills as an animator, rather than as a world builder or a writer. Another perk is that you can often find a lot of pre-made assets online, such as character models, weapons, and even 3D environments, that are ready to use in your animations, which can be extremely helpful, especially if you're a beginner with little experience in designing characters or props. And perhaps the biggest benefit, though, is that it's much easier to find an audience for fan animations. Fans of popular games or shows are already engaged in searching for related content, so it will be far less challenging than trying to convince people to give an entirely new project a chance. But in my opinion, the biggest reason to make fan animations is that it's just really fun. Many people get into writing by starting with fan fiction about their favorite worlds or characters, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing the same thing with animation. But unfortunately, fan animations come with one big problem, which is dealing with copyright infringement. After all, when you use someone else's intellectual property without permission, you're technically breaking copyright law. That's why it's crucial to carefully choose which fan animation project you want to pursue. Because some companies encourage fan involvement and even provide tools to help fans create content. But others, however, view any fan-made material as a copyright violation and may ask you to take down your video, no matter how hard you worked on it. So as a general rule, I recommend staying away from properties owned by Japanese studios, as they are usually less open to fan-made content. But don't worry, because there are also a lot of companies that are a lot more supportive towards fan content and will even help you out a little bit. One of the safest options, for example, is to work with games by companies like Valve or Hoyoverse. Both of these companies are extremely supportive towards fan content. So much in fact, that they've even hosted fan film competitions, developed specialized softwares to help fans make films based on their games, and even released downloadable PMX models for fans to use in their projects. But of course, as you probably already know by now, I think that one of the best and most fun options for fan animation is working within the RWBY universe. And just in case you've never heard about it, RWBY is an anime-inspired web series that started on YouTube under Rooster Teeth, and over the years, it has inspired many people to create their own original characters, teams, weapons, and even fan-made animated series set in the same world. The show's creator, Monty Aum, was a big fan of community creations. He hosted design contests, incorporated fan-made elements into the show, and provided fans with tools to create their own content. But more about that later. In my opinion, the thing that makes the RWBY universe so special and so fitting for fan creations is its sheer vastness. The world of Remnant includes many different environments and technologies, giving creators endless possibilities for original characters and stories. But the main reason I think that RWBY is such a great option for beginner animators is because of its roots as a series of short trailers. Many animators have since adopted this format, creating their own original characters and teams, and presenting them through short character trailers. And I think that this format is brilliant for new creators because it allows you to plan a small series of 4 episodes, which isn't too overwhelming but still provides structure. Each episode can be a standalone short film, so you get the flexibility to release them at your own pace. You can connect them as much or as little as you like, giving you creative freedom while maintaining the satisfaction of working on a larger project. For new animators, this balance is perfect. It lets you experiment with a significant project while working on it one video at a time. And it also gives viewers a sense of progress as they discover new characters in your original team. So let's say that I've convinced you that making a RWBY fan animation series is a good idea. The question now is, how exactly do you do it? Luckily for you, the rest of this video is dedicated to explaining how to create the most important thing for any RWBY fan project, which is creating your own team of original characters. So this tutorial will have a total of 5 simple steps, and I'm especially excited about step 3, because I'm gonna let you practice designing a specific element for one of my characters, and whatever you'll come up with could potentially become an official part of my web series. So if you're ready to begin, let's start with the video. So first of all, before you start writing almost anything, it's always a good idea to do some research to lay a solid foundation. For example, if you're writing something in a specific genre, you should start by immersing yourself in it. Watch a bunch of films or shows in that genre to get a feel for the common themes, tropes, and stylistic choices that audiences expect. This will help you figure out what elements you want to embrace, and what rules you might want to break. The same approach applies when you're adapting existing material. It's essential to understand the original work inside and out. But don't stop there. Try watching interviews with the creators, check out behind-the-scenes videos, and explore any other content that offers insights into the world you're building. The better you know the source, the more confidently you can expand on it. For example, back when I worked on my web series Carmilla, I started by reading the original novella. But I didn't stop at that. I also dove into vampire folklore and other gothic horror stories to understand the genre more deeply. That extra research really helped shape the tone and feel of my project. And it will definitely help you with your project too. So now you're probably wondering, how do you go about researching RWBY? First and foremost, I recommend watching the series itself and the original trailers that preceded it. And if you haven't watched the red trailer yet, please stop this video, go and watch it, and then you can thank me later in the comments. So now that those of you who paused the video to go watch the red trailer are back, your next stop should be the World of Remnant series on YouTube. It provides valuable background information on the lore, history, and world building of RWBY. And the last thing I recommend you check out is the RWBY Wiki website, which is basically the ultimate encyclopedia for anything related to RWBY. And my general advice for this part of the creative process is that you shouldn't treat research like homework. Instead, think of it as another hobby you can enjoy in your free time. This way, research becomes something you actually want to do. You'll gain a new series to watch at the end of the day when you want to unwind, more articles to read on the bus while listening to music, and new videos to watch, probably when you're sitting on the toilet scrolling through YouTube. Just try to remember that you don't need to be a hardcore RWBY fan to create something related to it. These are just recommendations to help spark your creativity. You'll likely find that immersing yourself in this world will help a lot with inspiring you to create your own content within it. So with that out of the way, we can finally get to the part you've been waiting for, which is creating your own original characters. But before that, if you're finding this video helpful, you can support this channel by clicking on the like and subscribe button below. So anyway, the first step of creating your own RWBY team is finding a good idea for it. For example, when I created my original team, my idea was to base it on characters from Arthurian folklore. By the way, since a lot of people ask me about this in the comments, here are all of the original inspirations for my characters on Team Realm. But of course, when you're gonna create your own team, you don't have to use the same source of inspiration for all your characters like I did. Even though it's true that the characters in Team RWBY are based on figures from German fairy tales, if you look at other teams, you'll notice that their sources of inspiration are much more varied. Let's take Team Juniper for example. Their inspirations come from French history, Norse mythology, Greek mythology, and even a Chinese legend. So in short, feel free to draw inspiration from fairy tales, mythology, history, or even pop culture. And don't be afraid to get creative with that, because the world of Remnant is big enough to accommodate it all. And once you've found your inspiration for your characters, the next step is to imagine how a character based on that inspiration would fit into the world of Remnant. For example, I imagined King Arthur as a character leading a team at Beacon, with her legendary sword envisioned as a relic from the time when magic still existed in Remnant. The White Hart, which many knights tried to hunt, became a Faunus character who feels persecuted. Lancelot became a cold lone wolf character who craves connection despite her solitary nature. And Morgan Le Fay? I imagined her as a dust expert with resentment toward her half-sister. So, no matter what your source of inspiration is, ask yourself, what kinds of characters typically exist in the world of Remnant, and how can you translate your inspiration into a character like that? So now that you have a solid idea of what kind of characters will be in your team, it's time to move on to the next step. Developing each of your characters. The most basic thing I recommend starting with is deciding what kind of weapon your character will have. In the world of Remnant, creating your own weapon is considered the ultimate form of self-expression for hunters, and the weapon is essentially seen as an extension of themselves. Of course, there are blacksmiths who craft weapons for hunters who aren't as skilled in that area, and some hunters inherit weapons from their parents or family members. But in most cases, it seems to be common for characters to design their weapons themselves. So when you're gonna come up with a weapon for your character, try to imagine what sort of weapon they will invent. And it's even better if their weapon is also a gun.
It's also a gun.
Oh.
And speaking of guns, it's time to talk about the type of ammunition the characters will use: dust. For those of you who don't know, dust refers to elemental crystals that serve as the primary energy source for almost everything in the world of Remnant. And among other things, they are also used as ammunition for weapons. In general, there are 4 primary types of dust that are the most common in Remnant, which are fire, water, electricity, and wind. And I would recommend sticking to only these types of dust if your character uses a lot of it or comes from a more modest background with fewer resources. You also have the option to combine dust types to create new ones. For example, combining wind and water creates ice, so you can experiment with that if you don't want to stick to just the basic elements. If you're interested, there are also rarer types of dust, which are more expensive or harder to find, like stone, plant, or even gravity dust. If your character uses these kinds of dust, they'll likely come from a wealthier background, or they may hesitate to use their weapon since it would be harder to replenish their ammunition. But the type of dust that is considered the rarest is actually hard light dust. It seems to have the ability to create force shields, missiles, platforms, or even mimic other weapons in some cases. If you want your character to use it, you should also keep in mind that the Atlas Corporation appears to have a monopoly on this type of dust, so your character will probably need to have some connection to Atlas or its main supplier, which is the Schnee Dust Company. Of course, there are characters who use hard light dust without being affiliated with these factions, but they tend to be more cautious when it comes to using their weapons. So now that you have an idea for your character's weapon and the type of dust they'll use, the next step is to think about a semblance that fits your character. For those unfamiliar, a semblance is essentially a unique superpower or special ability that your character has which comes from their aura, which is basically their life force. Most hunters in the world of RWBY are experts at projecting their aura outward in the form of a passive shield that protects them from injuries. But the next level of control over their aura is the ability to manifest it outward as some kind of a special ability called semblance. When brainstorming a semblance for your character, I recommend starting by looking at the weapon you've chosen and thinking of a special ability that complements it. After all, the weapon and semblance are two sides of the same coin. They are both ways your character, consciously or subconsciously, expresses themselves and reflects how they would fight most naturally. If you'll think about it, it's likely that your character would choose a weapon that matches their semblance. So it might be easier for you as a creator to actually reverse engineer this decision and figure out the semblance after deciding on the weapon. Let's look at my character Rose as an example. When I created Rose, I knew she would wield a sword due to her source of inspiration. Since it's supposed to be a legendary and powerful sword, I wanted to give her a relatively weak semblance to balance her power level against the rest of the team. So, I gave her a low-level telekinetic push that helps slightly with defense during battle, similar to the Ard sign from The Witcher. This choice also made sense for her character, because she failed the entrance exams to Beacon, so it felt logical that her basic skills in semblance control would be relatively weak. But the best advice I can give you about designing a semblance is to try to think about how much your character is already experienced in using it, and what that says about them. Generally, the more a character uses and tries to develop their semblance, the more abilities they can unlock with it. So if your character is more of a meditative or introspective type, chances are that their ability to control and develop their semblance will be way higher than other characters. After all, the semblance is a manifestation of the character's soul, so the more in touch your character is with themselves, the better they'll be able to control their aura and semblance. But now, instead of giving you more examples for how I did it with my team, I actually want to give you the chance to really experiment with that by designing a semblance for one of my characters. And the cool part is that whatever you'll come up with could become this character's actual semblance in my web series. The character I have in mind is Lady, who already appeared in 2 out of the 4 trailers I made for my team. And even though her role in the trailers is relatively small, you can already learn a lot about her and her backstory. If you haven't seen the trailers, you should know that Lady is the daughter of a rich dust factory owner who sold his company to the Schnee Dust Company and now works directly for Atlas. But what you probably don't know about her is the fact that her father's factory produces specifically hard light dust. So naturally, her weapon of choice is a rapier that can launch hard light dust missiles and create force fields. So now that you know all of those facts about her, try to really think about this character. Consider her background, resources, and weapon, and try to think about what semblance would make the most sense for her. Once you've come up with an idea, write it in the comments, and I'll choose the ideas I like most and that fit the character and the battle scene I'm planning. Then, I'll post them in a community poll on my channel on November 15th. And the semblance that receives the most votes will officially become Lady's semblance from now on. So, long story short, you've got 1 week to brainstorm and submit your best semblance idea, and potentially, leave your mark and help shape the future of the RWBY web series. But now let's get back to our topic of building your own RWBY team. And I hope you're ready, because we're about to get to the hardest part of this tutorial, which is following RWBY's famous color naming rule. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Monty and the other creators of RWBY have always encouraged and supported fan content based on their series. So much in fact, that at some point Monty has released a special document intended for fans, containing specific rules to follow in order to connect their characters to the RWBY universe. So this document is called the RWBY Color Naming Rule, and it essentially consists of 2 rules. The first rule is for creating characters, and it states that every character's name must be a color, sound like a color, mean a color, possibly in another language, or make you think of a color. And I know it sounds kind of simple, but I must warn you that choosing the right color for your character isn't always as easy as it looks. You'll likely find yourself diving deep into color meanings and symbolism until you land on the one that really resonates with your character's personality or story. So to make this process a bit easier, I recommend checking out a website called Color Meanings. It's a great resource where you can explore different colors and learn about their symbolism, which can help you find the perfect match for your character. But the most useful feature that this website offers is actually the ability to search for colors by the first letter of their name. And if you don't understand why this is so useful, just keep watching the video. Because the real challenge actually comes with Monty's second rule, which states that the team name must be composed of the first letter of each character's name, forming an acronym of 4 letters that spells the name of the team. And that name must also be a color, sound like a color, mean a color, or make you think of a color. For example, the team made up of Ruby, Weiss, Blake, and Yang forms Team RWBY. Or the team made up of John, Nora, Pyrrha, and Ren forms Team Juniper. So here's where things get a little tricky. You not only need to come up with names for your characters individually, but their initials together must also spell out a meaningful team name that relates to a color. And I must admit that this part was really difficult for me, because I really wanted the names of most of the characters to reflect their original source of inspiration. For example, Mirage is another word for Fata Morgana, or Morgan Le Fay. Lake refers to Lancelot of the Lake, and with Rose, it was important for me to choose a name tied to the color red, symbolizing the red dragon from Merlin's prophecy, which is associated with Arthur. And of course, I obviously wanted the name of the character inspired by the white stag to reflect some shade of white. And in addition to that, I also wanted to find a name with a medieval connection that would reflect the shared origin of all these characters. After all of them come from the same kingdom that King Arthur ruled. That's when I realized what I wanted their name to be. I decided to call the team Realm. The name immediately made me think of the colors on the banners of the kingdoms that the original folklore of these characters have originated from, and except for Mirage, whose color is sometimes also associated with nobility, all the other characters' colors match the banners of the kingdoms that inspired their origins. So yeah, I didn't exactly choose a name that makes you think of a specific color, but rather a specific color palette. Sort of like how the creators of RWBY used the Neapolitan ice cream color palette to create Neo. So now, after you've finished creating a team with 4 characters, the last thing left is to think about how to introduce those characters to your audience. At the end of the day, every RWBY trailer is essentially a short film, about the length of a song or two, that is supposed to showcase a character in a way that gives viewers their first real taste of who that character is. What I suggest is to focus on your character's inspiration, fighting style, personality, backstory, or relationships with other characters. And then, try to come up with a short scene or sequence that can introduce the essence of your character to the audience. And of course, every trailer should feel like a short action movie, so make sure to keep that in mind when planning out your trailers. And if you want to know how I usually create my films quickly, and how to move forward with developing your trailers from your basic idea to the final video, I recommend checking out the next video on screen, where I show you how I managed to create an animated film in just 1 week, and most importantly, how you can do it too. See you later!